Hey guys, so I wanted to talk a little bit about cylinder honing or deglazing, which is not the same thing, and why you need the cylinders to be straight. You can get away with it not being straight, but why you want them straight. I don't know if any of you guys watch Uncle Tony. He does a lot of Mopar stuff, home builds, DUI stuff. And he does have some pretty good videos. If you guys have never checked him out, if you're into old Mopars and stuff, he's a pretty good one to check out. But I wanted to just touch base on it. He was talking about deglazing cylinders and honing them and stuff like that. And as a professional, as I guess I would be classified, is why I recommend to do it. It's not so that you just spend your money. Like lots of people think that you don't have to do it that way. This is, I wanted to explain on the machine shop side of things why you should do it. If you can't afford it, it is what it is, right? So, and don't get me wrong, I've been in the position where I can't afford it and I've done it that way. Does it work? Yes, it does work. Does it last? Depends how bad they are. You know, so it's one of those things. I personally prefer to do it properly, in quotations, if you would call it properly. But I just wanted to touch base on the difference and why, you know, using a ball hone or a dingle ball, or using a three stone hone, or using an actual honing machine, which is right here. This is a Rottler diamond stone setup. But the difference in what the difference is. So we have here, this is a three stone hone, and basically it has a little bit of load on it because it does have a spring. As I pinch my hand, it does have a spring here and it hones it, right? But the issue with this is this will not take out taper. It'll actually make the taper worse. The reason for that is you have no way to control the load up and down and where the imperfection is without stopping every 5 seconds. So these are more designed for a deglaze than they are to move material, because it's really hard to keep the cylinders straight. And I wish I would have had, I wish I would have done this video a few days ago, because we actually had a block here we just finished that it looked really good, but it had 14 thou taper from top to bottom in the cylinder, which is bad. And I'll explain a little later in the video why it's bad. And then this is the dingle ball hone, which you can see how often we've used it. It's like brand new in the box. It's like dusty. I don't even know where it came from, to be totally honest with you. I must have had it for some reason, or maybe I got it in a box of stuff. I got 4 or 5 of them. I don't think I've ever bought one. We have some little tiny ones for doing lifter bores. We do use them on lifter bores, just to put a little crosshatch in the lifter bores. But I don't really know why we have this one. It's a pretty big one too. It's 4 1/8, so it's a pretty good size. Now, so if you're doing this, if you have a cylinder that's absolutely perfectly straight, but let's say you've glazed the cylinder over, or it has a little tiny bit of a score mark or something in it, that's what you would use this for. But you can use this for that same purpose, because neither of these are really designed for moving material, because they don't have constant load and you don't have full control of the cylinder being honed. Because if you go faster, and then it also depends on the dwell, because lots of times people spend more time at the top of the cylinder, and like I said, I'll show that in a minute on the whiteboard. More people spend more time at the top of the cylinder than they do at the bottom of the cylinder. And if you're not perfectly even, then you end up with the cylinder bores not straight. But what I wanted to show, so this is the Rottler, which is just a power hone. Just Rottler is the brand. There's no stones in it at the moment. We usually take them out. So this is just some of the stone holders and stones we have. So to give you an idea what this stuff costs, the hone I bought used, it was converted over, and I think it was $36,000 US. And then each one of these sets is $500 plus the actual stones themselves, which are actually not stones, they're diamonds. Each one of 4 of these is like between $700 and $1,000. So that goes to show you you know, how many thousands of dollars are sitting in this drawer. A lot. But nonetheless, not what we're talking about. But so this is the hone and, or the holder and the stone. And now there's 4 of these inside here. That's probably not the right spot for it, but just to give you an idea. And then there is a wedge inside there. You can see the wedge inside there that pushes on these. So when you're going up and down in the cylinder, there's actually in the display, it actually, in the display, it actually shows you. When it's going up and down inside the cylinder, it's the same amount and the same speed all the time. And oh, we got this turned on or not? Oh yeah, we do. Perfect. I wasn't sure if we had the power turned on to it or not. Oh, it's not going to show me anything. Yeah, hold on. So you see this line right here. This line gives you a an idea. That's really dirty. That means that it's perfectly straight. It's actually not. It's blinking in the video, but it's not actually blinking when you're standing here. But if the cylinder isn't straight, this gives you a general idea that it's not straight. So if it's tapered at the top, it'll be like this. That'll actually tell you that the cylinder's big at the bottom and big at the top and small in the middle. So basically, wherever it's big or small, it's going to show you the imperfection of where the problem is. To a certain extent, you still have to check with your dial bore gauge, but it tells you whether your cylinder is straight by the amount of load that it takes. So straightening in a cylinder, you can straighten a cylinder very easy with these. The issue is that the size becomes a problem. And on most gas applications with a cast piston, you're like a thou, let's say a thou to 2 thou clearance. With this, you can take that much material out, not that hard. It's not that hard. This a little bit harder. That will pull that material out like that fast. So you have to be paying attention to what's going on. But what I wanted to talk about, now that you guys have an idea of the difference, so to make sure that it's actually straight, and most of the time there's a taper in the cylinder, if it has any amount of hours or run time on it, right? So what I wanted to talk about is, if you look at a cylinder, and the cylinder is like this, obviously I'm exaggerating it, but that block that we just had here, the engine had run for, I think he put 35,000 miles on it since it was rebuilt, but it had a 13 thou taper. Cylinders look perfect. They had a 13 or 14 thou taper on it. It killed a set of rings. Why did it kill a set of rings? The cylinders looked good, but it had a lot of taper in it. And the reason for that is if you look at, so if the cylinder's tapered like this, like I said, 14 thou, and then this technically being 0, which is spec, right? Or like let's say a 2 thou taper, or a 2 thou bigger than the piston, which is roughly what it should be, right? Depending on the piston, there's a bunch of stuff that it depends on. But let's say this one calls for a 2 thou piston to wall clearance. So if you have 12 thou piston to wall clearance here. So basically what happens with the piston is the piston goes as it's going in the bore, it goes up and then bangs across this side and then drags back down. So the piston goes bang like this back down, or it'll go bang, 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 bang as it comes down. So you lose power from that. But that's not the only problem. Is when you're going up and down in this bore, right? The problem with it is the ring gap does the exact same thing. So as you're going in and out there, if you take this, now this is your, on a perfectly straight cylinder, your ring gap is whatever size it is. Let's say it's 25 thou ring gap. Inside there, that's what the ring gap is. If the cylinder is perfectly straight, your ring gap is going to be your rings are going to stay perfectly straight, right? Now, if you're like this, actually, hold on, let me move this over here. So if you got a perfectly straight cylinder, my marker's running up here. I'm gonna have to get some new ones. Whiteboard markers. I never think of it until I go to do this. So then your ring gap is going to be perfectly straight, right? So up and down in the cylinder, if you're going up and down, your ring gap stays perfectly straight, right? And the ring isn't doing this. Because you're, 5,000 RPM, that ring is ripping, right? So now you lose ring control. So if you have a cylinder like this, now, obviously exaggerating, your ring gap, your ring has to go big, small, big, small, big, small, big, small. And when it does that, what happens is it starts to take the temper out of the ring. Because if you take, let me grab a ring, squeeze the ring, right? So you're squeezing the ring, it's obviously not gonna touch, or if it does, then you got a bad day. But what happens is that ring does this, right? So it's ripping in there, up and down, up and down, up and down. So you can't even do it fast enough. Like doing that wouldn't even be a couple hundred RPM probably. But you're doing that at 4, 5, 6,000 RPM, let's say. So how long does the ring, you take anything, you take a piece of wire and do this with the piece of wire. How long do you do that before it breaks? Riddle me that. That's the biggest thing that you want the cylinder straight for something longevity wise is the ring can only do this so many times before the ring wears out. And also too, when it's doing that, it's getting bigger, right? So, you know, like I'm exaggerating because, your ring gap's probably only going to be like that big, right? So it's not obviously not moving. I'm exaggerating. It's easy for the film to see, right? Or for the camera to see. But it's going to be moving from let's say, let's say your ring gap's 10 thou, just for argument's sake. Your ring gap's 10 thou at this spec. Well, now it's going to grow. It has to grow and shrink 14 thou every time it goes up and down in the cylinder. Every time. So if it has to do that, your ring control, you lose ring control. And it also, because the ring is moving in and out all the time, if you take the I have pistons in here. Especially on something that doesn't have a steel ringland. Don't mind the dirty old piston. This is a used piston out of an engine, an engine that we tore apart. If you look at what happens is that ring moving around in there, your ring gap or your ringland is going to get worn. So what happens is now the ring, like this ring isn't for this obviously, but what happens is it moving in and out wears that ringland out. So you take a piston that let's say is half wore out to begin with, put it back together with new rings, and those rings are bouncing around in there. It takes no time for it to beat it apart. Then you knock the ringland off and kick a rod out the side of the block, something like that. So that's the reason, the main reason I recommend, if you're doing it and the cylinders are pretty close to straight, because you are allowed to have taper in the cylinder, okay, no big deal. But, so you are allowed to have taper in the cylinder. Don't get me wrong, you are allowed an allowable taper. And if it's within spec, so be it. If you want to re-ring it, deglaze it, re-ring it, by all means, as long as you're close to within spec. But if you're way out, or you have a cylinder that looks like, get rid of this. If you have a cylinder that looks like, wow, I shouldn't do it that way. That one's actually better. If you have a cylinder that looks like that, there's more than one issue when you have it like that. Or if you have one that sometimes you'll get it, like I'm exaggerating that obviously. If you get them so that it has two of them, like where the rings have stopped, so you have that same thing. Like there's going to be more taper. There'll be more taper on it the way that it goes. But that gives you a general idea of what I mean. If you have them like this, the issue with them like that, if you can catch it with your fingernail, so how fast your finger moves, right? If you can catch it with a fingernail, what happens when the flat edge of this ring hits it? So the flat edge of that ring hits that, you know, it hits this, because there's always like, if you can feel the ridge up and down, the ring will, now a new set of rings that aren't worn, one, it has to expand, and if it hits a spot, what happens to that sharp edge of the ring? You round that sharp edge of the ring off, right? Or it breaks the ring. So if it's like this, personally, I recommend don't run it. Have it bored out, put pistons and rings in it. They are not that expensive. Personally, like, I don't know where you guys are, what it costs to have it done. For us, like to do a Cummins block, you're $65 a hole. So we bore, hone, and use the torque plate. So there's some time for torque plate and stuff in that. But, you know, like a gas engine, depending where you are, you're probably between $30 and $45 per hole to have it bored and honed. And I realize that's not nothing, but if you're going to build the engine, I prefer to have an engine that's going to last a long time. Can you get an engine that's like this to build power and last a while? 100%. But if you're going to drive the car, if you want to drive the car and not have to take the engine out of it for 5-10 years, you know, put, let's say 5,000 to 10,000 miles on, they don't, in my opinion, they don't last. So it is what it is. But now another thing, if you are swapping parts, if you are swapping parts with different engines, and you have an engine that has a cylinder bore that looks like this, so it has a big ridge on the top, and you have a crankshaft that now is, let's say, ground 10-10, so 10 main, 10 rod. You can have, because if the offset of the grind isn't perfect, what'll happen is that piston protrusion, or how high your piston comes out, so I said piston protrusion, how high your deck height of your piston, or your piston to your relative to your deck height. If it's 5 thou higher, let's say, or 10 thou higher than what it was, or you use a different piston that has a ringland height different, or you use a rod that just happens to be a little bit longer, because the rods that were there have been, you know, they've been machined once and resized, and now they were lower, the new ones you put in there, so now it's 5 thou higher. What happens with this ring is going to smash into that ledge. And what happens with it, it busts the ringland off. I've seen this before. Like, I've seen these scenarios, and I've done it this way. I own an engine machine shop now, so I wouldn't do it that way, but I own an engine machine shop, and I realize not everybody has money. So if you have if it's usable, fine, that's fine. But what happens is if you have that we were talking about tolerance stack. If you're talking tolerance stack, it's the same idea. So if that piston now comes up 10 thou higher than it used to, or the ringland is in a different spot because you used a different piston from a different engine, you had a set of flat top pistons from an engine or something, and that ringland is in a different spot, because not all ringlands are in the same spot. So if you're starting here and now it's 10 thou higher, which I'm exaggerating obviously, but if you're talking 10 thou higher, what happens is now that when it's going up, it whacks that ledge and breaks that ringland off. Does it do it to start with? Maybe not. I bet it could do it as soon as you start it. So you went through all that hassle to take it all back out, throw it all in the garbage. I personally think that doesn't make sense. Myself personally. Depends on, you know, like I realize not everybody has the money. But if you have the money to build the car, I personally would maybe wait a little bit, you know, do a side hustle or whatever it may be, make a few $100. And even if the only thing you do is bore and hone it and put new pistons and rings in it, and then you do the rest of it, you know, the rods are okay and this and that, by fine. You know what I mean? I hate to see guys put stuff together, have a problem with it right away, and then now they're out the money and the time that they used putting it together and didn't get any enjoyment out of it. That doesn't make sense to me. So I hope that explains a little bit of what I'm talking about. I'm hoping anyway. And why, you know, the professionals say that you should do it. That's the reason. It's all about ring control. How many times does that ring flex before it doesn't flex anymore? How many times does it smash into that ledge before it doesn't smash into it again? Piston or ring. Or does it beat a bearing out of it? You know, if it only has a thou and there's a thou problem in there, it might not beat the ring and the piston out of it, so I'm going to beat if it takes the oil film off of your bearing and it beats the bearing out of it, and you have an engine failure. There's lots to it. So I personally, that's the reason that for me, I recommend doing it. Because like if you take, just for a short thing here, if you take I'm a Mopar guy, so we'll do a Mopar. If you take, let's say, I don't know, let's say a 440. So let's say a 1970 Mopar, or let's just say Dodge 440. So if you brought me that 440 and you said, hey man, I don't have a lot of money to spend, but I have, my cylinder bores have a ridge in them, I'd like to do something with it. To bring it here, for us to do it. So your 8 cylinders, so obviously, okay. And you bring me the block spotless. I don't have to wash the block. Because you can wash the blocks at home. It takes a little bit of screwing around, but you can wash them at home. So engine block is washed, good to go. For me to put it into the boring bar in the home, depending on how much material we have to take out of it. Your 8 cylinders times 42, and my brain's not working that good. So I'll have to do that by, I have a number in my head, but I don't think it's right. I should know. $336, right? That's to bore and hone it, right? So now if you're starting and you don't have a hone or any of that stuff's not free. You have to buy that stuff, right? Or borrow it from somebody, and then I personally buy it if it was me. Now, if you take that, so like a 1970, for piston for rings, pins, and pistons, you're $440, right? Pistons, rings. So between the two, if you're doing it, there again, I understand it's not free, but you're $776. That gives you new pistons, new rings, new pins. Now, if you have to have the pistons pushed on the pins, or if they're not floating, those ones aren't floaters. Obviously, you'll have to pay for that, but it's not that expensive. We charge $10 a rod, so it's another $60. But that gives you an idea. Have bored honed by pistons. That's for a 440. So a 440 is going to be more expensive than a lot of things because it's a Dodge product and they're more expensive. But for $770, that gives you an idea. Like with a small block Chevy, if you do it with like a, let's say a 1970 Chev 350, obviously your bored hone is going to be the same price. Bored hone, you're still the same price. But I bet you the pistons and rings for that are way cheaper. Let me just check here quick. Yeah, so you take a set of small block Chevy pistons, flat tops to boot, you're like $150. You probably can buy them cheaper. That was just the first one that came up. So if that's the case, then you're only talking, I really need to get a new marker. You're only talking $485 to do it, to knowing that you have a good seal and something that's going to last. Like I said, for more than anything, I hate for guys to do it and then not get a good result out of it. Myself personally, if you have to wait a couple months, like, anybody that's there again, my opinion, depending on how much money you make, I guess, but anybody should be able to, like, let's say in 4 months time, to be able to cut out stuff that you buy that you don't really need to get $800. For the most part, most people can do that. If you're building a car and you can't get $800 in 4 months to do something to your car, I don't know. That's one of those things. Completely up to you what you want to do, but that's the reason that engine machine shops recommend to do it. That's the reason for it. So whether you want to do it or not, I wanted to explain why we recommend to do it. And, not that we're just trying to jam you. It's for ring control, pistons don't wear out, all of that type of stuff. And to make sure the cylinder walls are straight for that reason. And without that type, without the proper equipment, measuring equipment and all that type of stuff, there's no way to actually measure it without a dial bore gauge. You can measure it, give you an idea, sticking the rings in and checking the ring gap, but that doesn't tell you like a super accurate way. So by all means, do whatever you feel is best for your build. But this is the reason, that is the reason, what I explained is the reason that I recommend to people to bore and hone stuff. Because if you do it, and you do it the best way that you can afford to do it, or the best way to do it, then you get a product that lasts longer, in my opinion anyway. Because you go through it and you do all that and you don't do it to this, you don't fix the cylinders, I personally think you're going to have problems. And will everybody have problems? Maybe not. And lots of guys get away with it. If you don't drive the car very much, you drive it like, a couple thousand miles a year, you might get 5, 6, 7, 8 years out of it. But if you want to, something you want to rat bag on, like the way that I rat bag on stuff, you want stuff the right way. But anyways, like, subscribe, hit me down in the comments, and remember, it's not rocket science.